Hi, Anne from Imaginative here. Today I want to do a STEM activity. And you remember Miss Lisa showed us that STEM stands for, the S is for science, T is for technology, E is for engineering, and M is for math. And today we're going to focus on S for science. What I want to do is make some pretzels. And when we do that, we're going to be demonstrating how the Maillard reaction works. Maillard was a French scientist, so I had to look up how to say his name. And
Maillard. Maillard.
Okay, so Louis Camille Maillard described this reaction in 1912. He was actually trying to help diabetes patients. He was studying how amino acids and sugars combine when you cook food. And he discovered that if you add a base or extra heat, it will increase the breakdown and recombination of these sugars and proteins in food. And these reactions are what's responsible for yummy brownness and crispiness in food. It's what makes coffee so brown. When you caramelize onions, you're using the Maillard reaction. And it's why we don't boil bacon. We fry it at a high temperature to make it crispy and brown. And it's evolved into a whole science of artificial flavors, and they use it in ramen noodles. So here's how it works. You're going to have to understand something about foods and what's in them and how we digest them. So in our stomachs, we have a strong acid, and we use that to break down food into tiny bits, or, as Lisa shows us these words too, molecules, which just means tiny bits. Some of those tiny bits will be turned into sugar, which we'll use for energy. Some are proteins that were broken down into amino acids, and the body will rebuild them into new proteins like skin, muscle, hair. The Maillard reaction uses not an acid, but heat and a base to break down the cells on the outside of our food, allowing the sugars and amino acids to recombine into new, yummy, crisp brownness. We are sort of digesting the outer layer of our food before we eat it, breaking those cells down and recombining the parts. And this also makes it easier for our body to get nutrition from our food, which might explain why it tastes so good to us. So here's two new science words, acids and bases. And I'm going to flip this around and show you what I'm talking about. So acids and bases might sound new, but you probably have a lot of these in your kitchen right now. Common household bases are soaps, baking soda, borax would be over here, remember making slime, ammonia, and in the middle, neutral, not acidic or basic, it's water. And then common acids that you might find in your kitchen would be oranges, cream of tartar, lemon juice, and vinegar. And how it works is the acids like to give up their protons, and bases love to take protons. And so you can imagine if the two of these get together, you get quite a clash of the titans. You get a big explosive reaction, and you'll get a lot of carbon dioxide and water released, and that's what happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar. Our experiment today won't be mixing vinegar and baking soda, but we will use the baking soda. We know it is a base and that it will pull proteins from wherever it can. And this includes the cells of our food. At one point in our pretzel recipe, it will call for the pretzel to be dipped in boiling baking soda water for 20 seconds. Our experiment will be how the strength of the base affects the Maillard reaction. It seems a little crazy to think that a quick dip in a liquid can change anything. We'll make one batch of pretzel dough big enough to experiment with, so we can be sure those ingredients are all the same for all the pretzels. And then we'll follow the steps exactly, except the part where we dip the pretzel into its 20-second bath. Instead, there we'll use nothing. We'll use water, we'll use baking soda, and we'll use baked baking soda, which we can see will increase the pH or make it stronger. Then we'll judge or eat the results and make all the rest of the pretzels with our favorite method, secure in the knowledge that we maximize our pretzel enjoyment by utilizing proper scientific methods. To the kitchen to begin. So I gathered all the ingredients in the kitchen, and wrote them down here. Make it easier for you. There's 5 main ingredients: yeast, flour, salt, oil, sugar, and then water. And you will also need baking soda for the baking soda bath. Looks like a 1/2 cup total. And then also some coarse salt for sprinkling on top of the pretzels when they're done. And I got this recipe from Sally's Baking Addiction. There'll probably be a link for that too. And I will read the steps. The first thing that she wants us to do is soften the yeast. It calls for a packet of yeast, so that's also 2 teaspoons. So I'll put that in here. You don't have to let the yeast rise in this recipe, but you do have to let it rehydrate the yeast first. Okay, so the yeast is rehydrating in the mixer, and then I want to talk to you or show you the baking soda. Okay, so what I did yesterday is I measured out 2 1/4 cups. Now the recipe calls for 1/2 cup of baking soda and 9 cups of water. I didn't have that much, and I wanted to try it at 2 different pH levels. So I used a 1/4 cup of baking soda straight from the box, and a 1/4 cup of baking soda that I put on an aluminum sheet and baked in the oven at 250 degrees for an hour. Before I did that, though, I weighed both of my baking soda 1/4 cups. And before I baked it, it weighed 60 grams. And after I baked it, the weight had almost cut in half. It was about 32 grams. So it did change quite a bit. That means it released, while it was baking, it released water vapor and carbon dioxide. It just floated away. And my solids that were left actually weigh less and have a higher pH. It's a stronger base than it used to be. It's farther away from the neutral center of water. So that's what I'm going to use for my baking soda baths. It was one of the most unsatisfying things to bake, because you can see this is what it looks like before it's baked, and this is what it looks like after you've waited an hour. It looks just the same. And Lisa and I had wondered if it was even worth doing, so we're going to find out today. So what I'll do is I'll put 4 1/2 cups of water in a pot and add one of the baking sodas, and I'll just keep them labeled. So we'll have boiling water, boiling baked baking soda, and boiling baking soda. And we'll see which one makes the best pretzel. And then nothing. Oops. Okay, our yeast is softened and hydrated. And then we'll add, you want 3 cups of flour eventually. Start with just a few. A couple of cups of flour. And a teaspoon of salt. And a tablespoon of sugar. You know sugar's important for the Maillard reaction. So a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of oil. And I'm going to mix that up. At the library, I just mixed it by hand, but since I'm home, I'm going to use this. And I'll have to add more flour too, but this is going to make some noise. Okay, the dough is done, looks like. So we're going to divide this up. The recipe says it'll make 12 pretzels. So we'll divide it up. But before we do that, let's leave it here for a second. We need to get the baking soda water baths going and the regular water bath. So what I did down here is I put exactly 4 cups of water in each one. I know I said 4.5 cups, but I couldn't measure. This was easier to measure exactly. So I'm going to put them all on to boil. I've got water, just regular baking soda. I'll add that. 1/4 cup to 4 cups water, and then the baked baking soda. I'll add that one. Turn them all on high to boil, and I got the oven, just started heating it to 400. That's what the recipe will call for. All right, so while that's starting to heat up over there, and they're all labeled so I know which one I'm going to be using for which pretzel. Now the other thing we got to do, and we have to do this at Wired at the library, is make sure the kids, it's portion control. We usually limit the kids to 3 ounces of dough at a time. And this recipe says it makes 12 pretzels. I think that's usually a little less than, a 3-ounce serving is a little smaller than we'll probably get out of this. So I'm going to go with grams, 888 grams, and I have to divide that by 12, 890. So here's our math part. Which of course my calculator's dead. Well, we'll just divide it in half and a half again. So it'd be 445 will be half. Ooh, look at that. That's 448. Pretty good. It's from all that portion control practice at the library. 444. Okay, so this should be 2 equal halves of the dough. It's not. It is. Okay. And then 222 would be 1/4 again. Ooh, that's perfect. So those are quarters. So it feels a little big. 232. Okay, so that's quarters. Now I have to divide each one of these into thirds, that's going to be the tricky part. So about 70 grams in each one. That's 72. That's 82. Okay, 72 and 72. So we've got 3 of them. And let's just see how much that is in ounces compared to what we give the kids. Oh, it's actually more. We give them, this is only 2.5 ounces. It might be a little bit hard to get a full-size pretzel out of it. We'll give it a try. So anyway, you're going to want to take your personal dough weight and divide it up. It says 12 servings on the recipe. And we're going to roll it out. Let's see if I can get this to hold part of it down. At the library we use duct tape. You want this to be as long of a rope as you can get it, because that'll make it easier to make a pretzel. And it also, all this is doing is increasing the surface area, because we want to let the baking soda, if it's going to do anything, it's got to get access to the outermost cells of our food so it can start to digest those foods, break them down, and then we'll recombine them into the yummy, crispy brownness that we're hoping for. So the more surface area, the better. And also, you don't want to mess with it after you've done that for one, you don't want to get the strong base on your hands. And two, the whole point was to get it on the outside, and if you start remixing it, then it won't be on the outside anymore. Okay, so here's the money shot. This is how you make the pretzel. Like that. I'm going to pinch it down. And I'm going to do that 3 times. Oh, and then this is something that one of the recipes mentioned, and I hadn't heard it before, but at this point you could take these and freeze them in the freezer, and that would help it keep its shape when you go to dip it into boiling water, because as you can imagine, even resting on a spoon, dipping it into a boiling liquid is going to mess with it a little bit. So especially for gluten-free pretzel doughs, I'm thinking maybe it would be a good idea to take these and freeze them, and then they'll be a little bit sturdier when you put them in the boiling vat of liquid of your choice. Either baking soda or baked baking soda is probably going to be the winners here. And so I'll put this back on fast forward. You don't have to watch me do all these. I've got my 4 pretzels, and I'm going to try to keep them in that orientation because it's just like the way it is on the stove. I'll do nothing to this one. I'll just put this one in boiling water for 20 seconds. This one will be in just straight baking soda from the box for 20 seconds. And this one will be in the baked baking soda. And we'll see how they all look when they come out. So, scooting down here, you can see I've got my stopwatch and a slotted spoon for pulling it out of the boiling liquids, and a drying rack, and then the salt that will sprinkle on it. And here's something that we don't really do this setup with boiling liquids at the library. What we do is just warm baking soda, warm water, and add the baked baking soda to it, and then let the kids have to keep it in there for more like 2 minutes instead of 20 seconds. And then they learn how to count up to 2 minutes instead of 20 seconds. Okay, so first one is nothing. Dun, 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 dun. There it is. I've done nothing to it. Now I'll put it up here in the corner of the baking tray. Sprinkle it with a little salt. And move on. Okay, the next one. And I can fast forward this again. But actually I'll do the first one just so you see it. Probably I'll try to leave the spoon somewhat near it. If I had a bigger spoon, I'd use it, because it's kind of gonna fall off. Okay, so boiling liquid, hit start. Lower it down in there. $17, $18, $19, $20, up. Now it's going to come over here onto the drying rack. It is a little stiffer. It started cooking a little bit, I think. And now I'll add salt to that. And I'll put it here on the baking rack. So it's the same, or the baking tray, so it's the same as over there on the stove. Nothing, boiling water. And now I'll do the same thing for the other 2. So we've got our 4 trial pretzels. I did want to say that when I was taking these ones from the drying rack to the cooking tray, I could definitely feel that the ones in the baking soda were slimy on the outside, and that's another characteristic of a strong base. Just like soap, bases are slippery. They feel soapy. All right, so, and then you want, if you feel that, you need to wash your hands, rinse it off. I mean, it's not a very strong base, but I still wouldn't want it on my hands for very long. All right, so they're going in the oven, and then we'll pop them out. It says put them in at 400 degrees for 12 to 15 minutes until golden brown. Got them out of the oven. And I can see quite clearly that the 2 that were boiled in the baking soda water are definitely browner, crispier looking, more delicious looking than the ones that had either nothing done or were just boiled in plain water. So adding or changing the pH of plain water and then boiling it definitely sped up the Maillard reaction. So, but I also don't see too much of a difference between these 2. This is the one that was done with the baked baking soda, where I baked the baking soda in the oven at 250 degrees for an hour and reduced the weight and increased the pH of it. And this one was just boiled in the baking soda and water mixture with the baking soda straight out of the box. And I don't think there's enough of a difference to warrant the long baking time, the prep time it took to bake the baking soda. But maybe you should try it. Maybe there was something that I did differently that I didn't even realize, and it will make a difference. It certainly did change the weight of it, so it did change the pH, just maybe not enough to matter in 20 seconds. So, let's see. So other things that when you do it, you are probably not going to have the boiling water baths. You can just do warm water baths. Just do 9 cups of water and a half a cup of baking soda, or cut it in half. But just do warm water, and then it won't be a boiling vat. It won't be quite as dangerous that way. If you do it with just warm water, you're going to have to increase the time you leave the pretzel dough in the warm baking soda bath. So your experiment might be how long you leave it in there. 2 minutes, I would say, wouldn't be too long if it's just warm water and not boiling. So, and then also experiment with the frozen shape. Experiment with different shapes. The surface area is what you're looking for, but it can be any shape you want. We've had some lovely looking spider pretzels that came out at the library. Okay, so until next time, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear what you find. And there's nothing left for me but the taste test. Bye.